Hey there, this is a bit of a tip that we wanted to put out there because a lot of people ask us, what nib should I use for what? So being, do I use the bullet or the brush nib and in what situation? So it just depends on the type of thing that you're coloring. Here I am working on my page for Secret Garden. I don't know if any of you guys have gotten into coloring that, but I'm absolutely in love with it. And I'll tell you, Chameleon pens were made for this type of coloring because we can really get blends into small spaces. And working with the pens on this illustration that I'm doing right now, I actually used a combination of both, and I'll explain to you why. One thing you do want to remember is anytime that you are going to be using your pens on a very rough surface, maybe fabric, wood, that sort of thing, you really do want to use a bullet nib because it's a little bit tougher of a nib and it can take a little bit more pounding. As Kathy always said, you wouldn't paint your house with your finest paintbrushes, so don't use that nice, super soft Japanese brush tip on really rough surfaces. So keep that one for paper. By the way, speaking of paper, what I did was I actually scanned and printed these out on my own on some 32-pound photocopy paper because it's a great book, but the paper's not so great for alcohol pens. So it's personal use, so it's perfectly fine. But for brush tips, I find that they work really best when you want a larger coverage in larger areas. So here I would choose the brush nib to be able to do these, but I might use a bullet nib to do something smaller like that. So I've used my pen and I'm just going to test that off to the side, and I'm just going to go and give this just a, again, side to side, very light touch. I'm going to work this so that I actually have the blend rather than side to side, but I'm going to work it so it's light and then coming down dark to the bottom. So here in this situation, I would use the brush tip because I'm working in a larger surface area. Now, if I wanted to work in, let me get in there a little bit. Sometimes what I do is I'll flip over in the same drawing and go to the bullet nib, and I haven't fused this one, so this is just pure color. And that's kind of cool because you can go in and just with a light touch, you can get some pretty nice fine lines in here and do the outline, and you can see the kind of contrast that you're getting is really kind of cool. Sometimes I'll go in with the bullet nib at the bottom, you know, or in special areas to sort of get even more depth and detail and dimension. And if it looks a little streaky, it's okay. It's alcohol ink. It'll blend into itself just once it dries. So if I'm looking at something like this, these little areas, I definitely would use the bullet nib for something like that. And it is so cool because what I can do in even the smallest spaces is I can get color blends using the Chameleon pen. So I'm fusing this for a couple seconds. As I always like to do is test off. I want it a little bit lighter. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and randomly, this is my favorite technique, color these leaves, kind of color hop around so that it's so natural. In one hit, I'm getting all these leaves, but each one is slowly becoming a slightly different color. See that? So then I can even go back in with that bullet now that I've got this darker color coming out and add even a touch, even the tiniest touch of detail of darkness down at the base of the leaf. So you can get some really cool effects. Of course, with bullets, you'll want to be able to do this if you want to do fine outlines. Again, just a light touch. Here you can see if I push harder, I get a thicker line. And if I go just touch a little bit lighter, I'll get a little thinner line. You can use the brush tip for that, but one thing is the brush tip, as you know, we want it to be a little bit delaminated at the end. So what you'll see on the brush tip is it might be a little, again, a light touch. It's really going to act more like a paintbrush. So if you have a steady hand, brush tip will work just fine for that as well. But it really is a little bit more like a paintbrush. So you're going to find that some of the little fibers at the end are a little splayed, but that's so that it can absorb that toning medium a little better. But that's okay because you can get some pretty neat effects with that. So what about something like these fins that we've got down here? How would I do that? Well, I probably would go, I'll show you both. You could use either the bullet or the brush on this. So here we'll use the brush nib so you can see how that works. And this is really, I know there's a real craze right now, which rightly so, for adult coloring. And a lot of people love to color these intricate images. And really, these pens are amazing for that. Because this is the brush nib that I use there. What I like about this is I can go in, when I color something like this with the scales, I'm just going to give this a quick fuse and test it off to the side. And I want like a mid-tone. So here I'm just sort of building the scales. And the point of coloring for relaxation and therapy, of course, is to relax. And what's kind of nice about using the Chameleon pens is that you don't have to be grabbing a ton of different marker pens. You just sort of can work with the same color and just fuse it every couple of seconds. I don't give it a long fuse. You'll notice I'm just like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then back over. So the longer you fuse it, obviously the more intense the dilution will be. But if you want to work into small spaces, these pens are perfect too. And even larger spaces, and I'll show you that. But see what I'm going to do now, this is kind of cool. Now that I've spent out a lot of the toning medium, I'm getting closer back to the solid color. I'm going to go in and I could use my brush for this to get inside here and almost create a natural drop shadow using that same color. The coolest part is we get all this depth and dimension in these tiny, tiny spaces that would be really difficult to get with any other type of marker. And you can see you can get some really neat effects. Okay, so that was the bullet or the brush nib. Doing the same thing I can do with the bullet nib. It's just a slightly different effect. It's good to work in these smaller areas. So I would use my bullet nib in these tiny areas. And you can see I've got a fair amount of toning medium in here, so I actually did pull this off to do 2 scales, and I kind of hop around as I spend the toning medium. So it's up to preference, but I've found that if you're going to work in a larger area, you're going to want to use the brush nib, and if you're going to work in smaller areas, it's best to use the bullet nib. And sort of think ahead as you start to spend out that toning medium. You know, now I'm back to the dark. I can use this in different areas that I may want to keep that area dark before I go back and hit it again with some toning medium. So then something like the face, I would want to be able to do using the brush tip. And what I would probably do is maybe I want to put a little highlight on the face. So I'm going to work this in two sides. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to work my way down so that I can get some dimension on the face of the fish. Like that. And then I'm going to work it so that there's a highlight in the center. It could be a highlight. You could work it from the top to the bottom. I'm going to give this a little bit of a fuse some more. Again, keep your pen straight up and down. And working it from the other side. You can see how I sort of do something with an obstacle in the center because you want to be able to keep that light either side. So now you've got this cute little fish. It's got this little ray of light. You can carry that ray of light down if you want, all throughout the fish. But the simple idea is basically if you are working in a larger surface area, it's easier to use the brush nib. And if you're going to work in a smaller surface area, like something like this, you're going to want to use the bullet nibs. And anything that you're working on that is a very rough surface, excuse me, you are also going to want to be able to use the bullet nibs instead of the brush nibs. Real quick before I go, I have to show you how to do these little fireflies because they are so cute. And again, I'm going to use the bullet nib on this one because it's really a smaller area and I can get such incredible blending and detail in this area. So I test off and now I'm just going to give this guy a little color because I want to go in light in the center and then dark on the outside for this one. And I could have done that the other way around. I could go light on the outside and dark in the center, but it all depends on which direction you want to color. So from the bottom, what I'm going to do is light to dark. I'm just giving this a fuse of literally 3 seconds to try and get me down to that, just that lighter color. And what you can see, which is kind of cool, and if I can sort of zoom in on this for you, is you're getting a really intricate blend. And I can go back in and with the bullet and add some more color into there and get this incredible little blend. Let's add a little blue in this area, in the tiniest of spaces, which is really neat. And that's as simple as it is. Bullet or brush, really simple question, simple answer.